Um,
Hey, everybody, welcome back to the 50 podcast. Today we are here with Bridget, aka the Lady Law Shield. She's a former deputy sheriff helping first responders navigate legal challenges as an attorney. So, for our listeners who don't know you, can you give them a quick bio about yourself? And then after, we will peel back the layers on the things we talked about above and more.
yeah, BRIDGET TRUXILLO. I am an attorney, and like you said, my firm is called Lady Law Shield. I don't that was an evolution to come up with that name. I've always thought like I could be the Truxillo law firm, but who cares? Like you don't care what my last name is. You want me to do something for you if you have a legal problem. And so I wanted to come up with something different. And actually, it's state bar approved because they won't let you use certain words if it really reflects like law enforcement. I can't use it in a law firm name because they said it could give the hint of undue influence. Anyway, so it
Oh,
has the stamp of approval from the State Bar of Texas. Lady Law Shield, like I said, I'm an attorney. I've been an attorney a long time, all in civil litigation. Before that, I was a deputy sheriff in Florida. I live in Texas now. I've been in Texas for a while. I was started out in patrol like everybody. I did undercover narcotics for 3 years, so I always say I bought crack for a living for a long time. Bought a lot of crack, and overlapped. I was on SWAT team. I was the only female member they had of SWAT. The only one they had before that or after that. They haven't had one since then. And then I always say that because I was on SWAT, I quit law enforcement. But we can talk about that. It was the coolest time of my life, and it turned out to be one of the worst times of my life, but the worst things often turn into good things. So, but I'm also a mom of three kids. I have a 13, 12-year-old daughters, and I have a 7-year-old son, and um, craft my life so that can take advantage of that as much as possible. And I'm married, and I live in Houston, Texas, and I'm from the South. I've lived all over the South.
wow. I just learned so much about you in that. The swap thing is so cool. Oh my God, I can't wait to learn more about that.
Yeah.
Um, so we're gonna go over your foundation in law enforcement, then obviously how you got here. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can see behind Bridget, we were talking before we went live, but she said it's like the most expensive wall.
Yeah.
She has
All that.
all her degrees behind her. If you're just listening, she has like a ton of degrees behind her, all the bar exams that she took and her degrees and all that. So we'll get to that. But I'd like to ask my guests a question, every single guest, the same question, because I'm curious about how people get into law enforcement and why, and maybe their family life had something to do with it, or maybe it didn't. But tell us about your family life and growing up.
Yeah, so like I said, I grew up, I'm all from all over the South, basically. I'm from Louisiana, North Louisiana. My parents are both from to really small towns, Jonesboro Hodge and Arcadia, Louisiana. If anybody, it's somewhere between Shreveport and Ruston. Anyway, on Long I-20. And my parents divorced really young. I don't remember my parents being married. I'm the middle of three. I have a sister that's 2 years older, and I have a brother that's 2 years younger. We're all very close. Partly because we moved around a lot growing up. So we moved in second grade, third grade, fourth grade, seventh grade. Went from Louisiana to Missouri, Oklahoma, Arkansas, back to Louisiana. Um, the last one was moved in middle school, which was just torture for a girl. Or at least for me. I don't remember my sister having that much of a problem with it, but girls are brutal, as we know. High school was freaking awful with the girls. I couldn't wait to get out. I was either going to go to Louisiana Tech or LSU for college. And my dad is one of six. And although they all grew up in this really small Jonesboro Hodge, Louisiana town, they all, but my dad had moved to Florida. And so I had a lot of cousins, and we're all close in Florida. So I decided I would go to the University of Florida. Just funny story about that. I had this really crappy high school boyfriend, and he was like, "Well, I got into Florida," suggesting that I was too stupid to get into Florida. So I applied to Florida, air quotes, and got in to the University of Florida. And then come to find out he had applied to Florida State and I had gotten into University of Florida. And I just want you to know it's the better of the two schools, as I say, as a proud Gator grad. Just kidding. He was very
Oh,
smart.
some fighting words.
That's right. So go Gators. I'm full on Gator Nation grad. And anyway, went to University of Florida for college. Like I said, and then right as I did that, my dad ended up moving to Florida, so that was good because my dad would be somewhat kind of close because we're definitely very close. And my mom right after that moved to Texas. Um, I had no plans of ever living in Texas, but went to University of Florida. Um, took Ended up in my fourth year of engineering. I had no idea what I was doing when I was picking engineering. I needed to pick a stupid degree, and I thought, well, my uncle's an engineer and he's nice, so I'll pick engineering. Well, engineering is awful if you don't want to take maths and sciences and physics, and it was just awful. And I was making decent grades and getting by, but I was just miserable. So in my fourth year of college, I withdrew from school, went to New Zealand by myself for a month. My dad didn't talk to me for a year. Came back, went to school, worked full time because my dad withdrew everything, including, I mean, he wasn't paying for all school anyway. I have school loans, but then he took my car back and sold it. He was mad at me for going. So I came back, worked full time, ended up going into getting a degree in horticulture, which I got a year later because they took all my maths and sciences from engineering as my electives. I was agricultural and biological engineering because I never could see myself being like an inside office person. And I thought, well, that's engineering, but I can be outside. And when I switched over to horticulture, I chose horticulture because it was still that overlap. And a friend of mine that I met my freshman year of college was in it. It seemed cool. I never chose a degree really knowing what I was doing. But graduated, and when I graduated, had no idea what I wanted to do with that degree. And I joke and say that I watched G.I. Jane and thought that was cool. So I decided I was going to go into like federal law enforcement somehow. And I also say like no disrespect to any Navy SEALs because um, although also at the time women weren't allowed to be on those teams. I'll just date myself. That was 2000. I think it was 2000. Anyway, so that's I'm getting ahead of myself. I was growing up, like I said, moved around all over the South. I'm one of three. I'm in the middle. Love my brother and sister. My sister is in north of Dallas. My brother is in Utah, but he's moving to Texas, and I'm just so happy about it.
Hey.
Because my kids love him, and we love spending time together. So anyway, my mom lives in Texas. My dad splits his time between Florida and North Carolina. Thankfully, he's not in the part of North Carolina that is so devastated right now. And my thoughts and prayers go out to every single person in the path of that hurricane from Florida to North Carolina. But my heart just breaks for the rising death toll and everybody that's so displaced because of that storm. But anyway, close to my dad, talked to him this morning. But that's my growing up. That's my story. That's my background.
It's interesting because I feel like um, no matter who I talk to, a lot of family background is a lot of chaos. Not that
Mm,
it's bad, but
right.
it's just a lot of chaos. So I feel like naturally you're good at being a police officer because you know you know how to
Hmm.
deal with chaos and things
Hmm.
coming at you and how to adjust. But what inspired you to become a police officer? So you have this like engineering degree or
Horticulture,
the
yeah.
horticulture
Plants.
plants. Eh,
Where's that degree? Where did I see that one? Oh, that's
Where's
that
it
one.
on the wall?
I have a Bachelor of Science in
So
environmental horticulture.
how did you what happened? Like, how did you become a police officer then? So you have this awesome degree and then you're like, I want to be a police officer. How did that
Yeah, I
work?
went to the police academy the week after I graduated college. So that spring, my degree in horticulture specialized in, and also again, I didn't know what I was doing. There's three different ways you could get a degree in horticulture, and I chose one not having any idea that mine was in sort of specialized in like mass production of things. So when you buy poinsettias at the end of the year, or when you buy your celery, like I would have worked at the nursery where they grow that stuff. So nothing but poinsettias or nothing but celery.
Mhm.
And that just seems so boring to me. While I love plants and I love being outside, like I said, I just could not see myself doing it. That just seems so monotonous. And I was exercising a lot at the time. I ended up working at like the Gainesville Health and Fitness Center. I worked there and exercise was an important part of my life, and I, again, watched GI Jane. Just kidding. I did watch it though. I never shaved my head, but I was motivated to do one-arm push-ups. But just kind of got thought, okay, so I've said this a lot. I wanted a job that would require me to be fit. So I thought, well, I'll go into law enforcement. But knowing what we all know now, once you get into the job, is it does not require you to be fit. I think the physical standards to once you begin get on the job are just sad. Um, and so I thought it would require me to be fit, so I wanted a job that would require that. And then I am a true dork when it comes to a self-described dork when it comes to the rule of law and our constitution. No, our country's not perfect, but we have I think it's a fantastic country. I believe strongly in the rule of law. I believe strongly in right and wrong. And I think there's honor in doing your part in helping to maintain safety in your communities. And so I thought I would want to do like federal law enforcement because nobody in my family's ever been in law enforcement in any kind of way. So I thought, FBI or DEA, I reached out to those people and they said, well, you're just too young, even though I was almost 24. They said, if you don't have a specialty like attorney, accountant, speak some special language, then just go work for a while and get some experience and come back when you're like 27. And so I knew somebody that was at the sheriff's office. I went and talked to them. I did a ride along and I'm like, okay, I'll do that. And then the sheriff's office offered to pay me to go while I was in the academy. Basically, they just paid the cost of the academy plus like this much money. Um, and I thought, oh my God, I'm getting paid to go to the academy. But anyway, so that's how that kind of evolved because I thought I would, on my last semester of college, I thought, well, I want to be a Fed. And then I realized I'd go local to get there, and that's how that evolved.
Okay, so that's interesting because I could see you wanting to be a Fed. Like
Mhm,
that like lines up.
mhm.
But for them to tell you to go get experience, I guess I wonder if they still do that now. But I feel like they'll just take you fresh out now.
Well, I
But
feel like we all know the numbers are so low, but
yes.
actually don't know if the numbers for the feds are as low as the numbers for the locals, because we all
Uh,
know there's a recruitment
right.
problem. There's a mass exodus over the last several years. Um, but I wonder if that's had the same effect for the feds. I wonder.
Probably.
I would think
Or
so, because law enforcement's law enforcement.
yeah, or just like the candidates maybe not as qualified
Right,
anymore.
right.
So you told us earlier that you worked in a lot of like units, had a lot of really cool roles within policing. Um, what was your favorite experience or role, and can you tell us about that?
Uh, each one, when you first start out and you're on patrol and you get out of training and you're on your own, and some parts, there's so much of it that's so boring. Like they even say the 80-20 rule is not accurate, as you know. I mean, it's like 95% of the time you're bored or just
Yeah.
trying to find something to do, or maybe I mean, because I don't think you are. You don't seem like the type person. I wasn't like I'm not the type that's just going to go sit in a donut shop and wait, or avoid
Yeah.
things. Like I was the one pulling people over constantly. In fact, they would always get mad at me. I would do a traffic stop at an hour before shift change, and they'd get mad. All the other guys are like, "Would you tell her?" Like, actually, my former FTD, field training deputy, FTO, came to me and was like, "Bridget, everybody's asking if you'll stop doing traffic stops an hour before shift change because if the shit hits the fan, if, things go bad, then you're gonna hold them over." Like,
That's
I
so
was so
true. That
mad. I was
still
like,
happens. That still
yeah.
happens.
And so I was that. I was very proactive, and then, but also, I was bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and
Mm,
the world is wonderful when when you first start. And then was in patrol for a year, like I said, and then went to the narcotics unit. They had no females, and that's just silly. And so then got thrown into buying crack, and I can say I mean, I was strategic in the sense that I was doing it as a resume builder because I figured that would help me go federal. And also the things that you see not that you don't see bad things in patrol because you do, but just seeing drugs every single day and the crackheads every single day and then getting the search warrants and going into people's homes and seeing the kids that are living in these drug houses. It's just so it was great, but not. I mean, if you know what I mean. And then for sure, the SWAT was the best. We would compete in SWAT competitions, which I loved so much. And I want to say this: I had the same tryout as everybody. I do not believe that women should have different physical standards than men. Because if you're going to fight, it's not like somebody's going to fight you differently because you're a woman. They're going to beat the living daylight out of you if they can. So you need to be able to do the job. You need to be able to jump the fence. You need to be able to run. You need to be able to recover when you're all those things. And so I did the same SWAT trial as everybody else did. And when we competed in the SWAT competition, I had the first year we had 2 teams, the second year we had 1. So, like, the second year, I competed against my own SWAT teammates to make the SWAT competition team, which and there was 6 of us, and we had 22 of us on the team. So that means I beat out 16 other of my teammates to make the team. And then when we competed, there was 6 of us, but only 5 would compete each day. And well, the first year I competed every day, which means that even on the competition teams, somebody was not as good as me
I
or
need you
my
to say that
skills.
louder for the people in the back.
Yeah, so I definitely and I earned that spot. Um, the second year there, I think there was one of the days I didn't compete. I can't remember which one it was. I think because of the first day you run into a building and it's a clearing a building scenario, and then you have to find the can't remember if they had smoke or if we had our gas mask blacked out, but you had to find the person you were supposed to rescue. The person you're rescuing was a big like uh punching bag and it's heavy and you got to be able to get it's all timed. And so I think that one where there were some of the bigger guys that were, can lift more than me. They're dudes, I'm not. Um, so I think that was the only one I didn't compete in that second year. But the obstacle course, which is no joke, I competed in that every time. Um, I remember the second time one of my guys coming on the SWAT team. We've been on SWAT together for like 2 years. We competed on SWAT competition together 2 years in a row. And after the second time I competed, he comes up to me. He goes, Baragona. Yeah, that's my maiden name. Baragona. I'm just gonna tell you, you're all right. And like, okay, thanks. It took you 2 years to realize that, and 2 years of training. Okay, all right, thank you.
Yep.
Thumbs up. Anyway, um, also the same person that came up to me after I quit SWAT team because I told him they could shove it where the sun don't shine. Came up to me afterwards and said, "Oh, I just want to say you got a raw deal." And I looked at him, and the one hand, I guess he wanted me to say thank you, but on the other hand, I wanted to scream at him and say, "Then why didn't you say something? Why didn't you tell them to stop? Why didn't you tell them to leave me alone?" Like nobody would, never said that. So we'll get to that. But
Yeah.
the favorite by far was SWAT team when I was getting to do that training, when we were doing SWAT competition training. Have always thought that was the closest I ever got to being like a paid athlete because we just trained all the time. We'd go to the track one day, train there. We'd do I just absolutely loved it. And obviously there was a lot of danger to it. I mean, one of our
Yeah.
call outs was a guy shooting a rifle. He was high on meth and he was shooting his rifle out into the neighborhood. And for anybody that doesn't know, that's not in law enforcement, there's not that many surfaces that can stop a rifle round. Concrete blocks can, but can get through, some of it. Regular house frame houses do not stop rifle rounds. So that was quite scary. Um, but so it was definitely the most amazing being on SWAT team.
So you said earlier that SWAT was the most like the best and the worst thing.
Yeah. Mhm.
Can you talk a little bit about the struggles you faced in SWAT? Was it
Yes.
because you were the only girl and like you got
Yeah,
picked on
100%.
or okay,
Yeah.
I
Um,
figured.
you did the tryout, and I remember we lined up, and we started before the sun came up, and we did I don't remember, we ran and ran back. I don't remember how far it was, and it was like the running was no problem. But I mean, I was standing in that line thinking, like, I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know if we were gonna be sprinting and I'd be trying to keep up and throwing up as I go. I didn't know, but the run was fine. And then I can't even remember all the things, but there was some rappelling and there was some shooting and there was some shooting and running. There was definitely an obstacle course version of it where at the end of it you have to drag a dummy, I don't know, 75 yards or something and then get it into the SWAT van. And the way I did it was I dug my fingers into the dummy's heels and I dragged it and
Ah,
got it into the van. I never thought I'd be able to open my fingers again.
oh my gosh.
Uh, but So I didn't even know. I remember lining up and the SWAT commander at the time screaming out, "Baragona, you're making history today." And I just remember thinking, God, could you please not make this a big deal? Like I
Right.
know it's a big deal and I just showed up for it. But to give you an example, this was like I said, about a year and a half after I was out of the police academy, or about a year and 3 months later. And one of my friends, air quotes, from the police academy, a guy, I worked for the sheriff's office. He went to work for the city inside of our county, and he calls me and says, "Hey, I heard you're going to be trying out for SWAT." I'm like, wow, the the grapevines in law enforcement are
Right.
quick. And I said, "Yeah, that's right." And he said to me, "Do you really think that's a good idea?" And I said, I don't remember exactly what I said, but certainly in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, well, we're obviously not friends. Definitely never talked to him after that. And said, yeah, what I mean, I don't know, why would it not be?
Right.
Um, and so there was no physical assaults, like nobody pushing me out of the way or anything like that. But over time, it was I just was never out of trouble. I was in trouble all the time. And at first it was me being bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, like, "You're right. I made a mistake. I'll do better." And then the next day,
Mhm.
"You're right. I made a mistake. I'll do better. Golly gee." And then after about a year and a half of it, I started thinking, "Golly, can you just leave me alone for a day?" Like,
Yeah.
and then looking around and saying, "Well, how come, I got in trouble for leaving my door open when the SWAT of my car while the SWAT team is in the parking lot surrounding my car, and yet my sergeant in narcotics, who was also one of the team captains in SWAT, here is an example. This is not that long after Columbine. Even if you're really young, everybody still, there's too many school shootings now, obviously, but Columbine was a really, really big deal at the time. It still is. But part of the problem with Columbine was that they didn't go into the school to clear it to go get the shooter. They waited too long and kids died while they were waiting. And so then it turned into, well, let's not do that anymore. So you would do active shooter trainings all the time, especially SWAT teams. So the summertime, we were doing an active scooter okay, promise I haven't been drinking. Active shooter school, whatever, you know what I'm saying.
Yes.
Training in a high school in the summertime, so there were no kids there, but it was in the hood. And we were doing the training, and I come out and I see my sergeant's car, his trunk's open, his doors open, his windows down, and he's more senior than me, SWAT team captain, all this stuff. So he has AR-15 or some type of, I'm sure he had a rifle in his car, a Benelli shotgun, MP5, all the ammunition for all of that, flashbangs, probably some grenades, and all this stuff in his car, and his car's wide open in the hood. And I remember looking around with like my mouth wide open, like looking around thinking, does anybody else see this shit? Because if I did that, I'd be getting screamed at the top of somebody's lungs, 500 mountain climbers, 6 months probation, a letter in my file. I mean, they would just
Mhm.
throw the book at me and nobody said a word to him. So fast forward a couple weeks, maybe, it was just eating me up. And so finally, because this is like, I just got in trouble for everything.
Yeah.
And I finally went to my lieutenant, who's my SWAT team captain and my lieutenant over all of narcotics. And I said, "Hey, LT, I kind of told him what happened. I was really not, I didn't say a name." And he's like, "Well, who is it?" I'm like, "I don't want to tell you who it was, but I tried to just make it as generic as possible to say, like, this is what happened. And, um, if that happened to me, you would have thrown the book at me." And so I said, "I'm not asking for better treatment. I just want equal treatment."
Yes.
And he said to me, "Don't make trouble for yourself where there's not any." And I said, "Don't really understand what you mean by that, because I'm kind of trying to point out where I do have trouble at times." And he said again, "Don't make trouble for yourself where there's not any." Okay, so fast forward a couple more weeks. In the meantime, I'm on the narcotics unit. I had been doing in our jurisdiction, we had to have we at the time had to have 3 buys out of a house before we could get a search warrant. I
Mhm.
did the undercover buys. I think it was probably crack in this guy's house in a mobile home way out in the woods. So my backup when I'm doing this undercover stuff couldn't even be close because you would notice if there was a whole bunch of cars circling around. So
Right.
I'm buying undercover drugs in a house from this great big dude who had a rifle sitting up leaning right next to him the whole time. So, I mean, if he had grabbed that rifle on me and like nobody would have been able to save me.
Right.
Backup wasn't close. So I did all these buys. I get the search warrant. Our SWAT team would execute the search warrant, secure the house, and then the narcotics unit would come in and take over and do our thing. And of course, as the only chick, I never got to do any entries. I got to do one ever, but I would always drive what I called the bread van. Like I was the one driving the van behind the SWAT, the tactical vehicle. Well, after that, and this is after I tried to talk to my lieutenant, um, we were at a party. The ADA we worked with had a party and invited some of us that worked from the narcotics unit because we would work with them so much. And one of the guys on SWAT was like, "Hey," he basically said, when we were executing my search warrant that I put my life on the line for, that they were calling me a rat behind my back in the tactical vehicle the whole time because my lieutenant went and told the team that I was
Of
trying to
course.
rat out one of my own teammates.
Of
So my
course.
lieutenant, like the
Yep.
leader, told
Yep.
the team I was trying to rat somebody out. And this is after I'd competed in 2 SWAT competitions with them, that I've done all the things. And that's when it hit it's like a ton of bricks landed on top of me. It was so crushing. That's when I finally realized nothing I was gonna do was gonna change their mind. I was
Yep.
never gonna be a respected operator, at least not under those circumstances with those people. And leading up to that, like my old lieutenant, one time I didn't get a car set up for an undercover buy as quick enough for my lieutenant. And my punishment was that I had to take this RV that we had confiscated from somebody to go wash it. Well, we got off our shift that night at midnight in the narcotics unit. So I had to go drive this RV way out because it was only like, there wasn't that many car wash stations that were big enough for an RV. So I had to drive it way out, wash it, finished it, like got back at like 2 o'clock in the morning. The next morning, I have a crash report in my box because apparently when I pulled out of the sheriff's office secure compound after never having driven an RV in my life, I dinged the tail light. So I broke the tail light, the brake light on the back. And they wrote a crash report for me. So my captain calls me in. He's like, "Bridget, what is this?" And I was like, "Are you kidding me? Why?" He's like, "Why were you watching something at 12 o'clock at night?" And I was like, "Well, I didn't set up the car in time." And my captain, who I still keep in touch with, he's actually sheriff now. He looked at me and said, "Bridget, is there anything you want to tell me?"
Mm.
And I was like, in my head thinking, "Oh, I could just tell him all the ways I think this is not fair." And then thinking, "But does it matter if it's not fair? Is it just me? Am I making this up in my mind as we all do ourselves? As all my clients now call me and say, 'Bridget, does this matter? Am I making this up? Should I not be reporting this?'" And I looked at my captain and I said, "Nope, I'm fine."
Yep.
And I walked out. And then, but this is then fast forward when they called me a snitch. I walked in my captain's office and I said, "That's it, I'm done." I said, "I want off SWAT team and I want off narcotics and I want on day shift starting tomorrow." And he said, "You got it." And gave me
Wow.
exactly what I wanted because he knew.
Yeah.
So it was a 2.5 year process of going from like, this is the most amazing thing I've ever done to feeling like pulling over on the side of the road because I'm crying so hard I can't see straight, can't drive, and just feeling
So
so
sad.
crushed. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so sad too because like you said, you took the same exact test that they all
Mhm.
took, same
Mhm.
level, but yet they're so insecure about their own like abilities that you could be standing next to them and they have to feel like they need to be more masculine or something
My,
or rude.
SWAT commander, I don't remember the circumstances of how it came up each time, but I can remember vividly, especially the last time, my SWAT commander saying, "You're the only reason you're on this team is because the captain made me put you on there." 3 times. So the 3rd time, we were working out. We were the only 2 people in the gym. I turned around and looked at him and I said, "Lieutenant, I heard you the first 2 times." And I
Mhm.
refused to, like, walk out, like, I finished my workout, but, like,
Mhm.
I was, like, I couldn't believe it. So, yeah, I it was nonstop. Um, and by the time I told my lieutenant by the time I wanted transferred off, I knew I was gonna take the LSAT. I knew I was gonna try and go to law school. So I knew by that time, or basically once I hit that, like, I had found out they called me a snitch and left the party and crying so hard I had to pull over, called my mom. I couldn't even hardly talk. I was crying so hard. And I was like, "This is it. I can't do this. I cannot choose." Even if I were to stay and get a job in the federal sector, I worked with enough federal investigators when I was on the narcotics unit to know, like, it's the same thing, and no
Yeah.
disrespect to any of the federales out there listening, but just seemed same thing, just bigger egos is what I felt at the time. Like, and I just don't wanna fight this battle every day. Like, a girl that you had on recently, and I saw her TikTok post, like, it's the exact same thing. Like, I choose to not embrace, like, it's not, at some points in life, you embrace the suck and you get through it. Because I mean, that's what she said. Like, I just didn't wanna have to embrace the suck the rest of my life.
Right.
But I choose I couldn't envision myself fighting that kind of battle every single day for my entire professional career.
And it's
So,
sad because you would
yeah.
continue to fight it. Like,
Oh,
you can prove
totally.
yourself as many times, but as a woman, you're
Mhm.
gonna continue to have to fight to
Yeah,
prove yourself, no matter
yeah,
what.
right.
Is that the driving force that got you to go to law school, or did was that something you always wanted to do?
No. I knew I had a lot of very clear, intention around becoming a cop.
Mhm.
I did not have that around going to law school. I did not know what to do with my life. I looked into going back into the horticulture area somehow. Like, I did not know what to do. And I remember one time, at the time, my dad lived in the Keys in Florida, which was amazing. Um, and I was visiting my dad, and we're talking about it. And we went to dinner with some of his friends, I remember, and they ended up getting into this political conversation, and lawyers are stupid and lawyers are awful and blah blah blah. And he turns to me and he goes, "That's what you should do, Bridget. You should go to law school." I was like, and I said to him, I said, "Dad, did you hear yourself? Because you just went on and on and on about how awful attorneys are, and you just looked at me and said I should become an attorney." He goes, "Oh yeah, but you'd be different." So then I was like, I started thinking about it. I was like, okay, well, I'll try that. Um, and that was the spring of 2004. And I left the sheriff's office in December of 2004.
I
So
was
I'd
gonna
kind of
ask you if
already,
you left the sheriff's office to do law school or if you
yeah.
overlapped. So you left.
No,
Okay.
no, they did. And I started in August of 2005, and there was a story about why I had a gap between December and August, but uh, we don't have enough time. So I didn't know what to do and thought, well, law school can't be a bad thing. Like, having a law degree, everybody knows, like, it's not a bad thing. It doesn't look bad on a resume. But I didn't know what I wanted to do with it. And then right before I started law school, I met my now husband. I was in Florida, he was in Texas. I had no intention of ever living in Texas. I met him and thought, gosh, that's a shame. He's so cute. But, and he's from a big family and I'm from a big family, and he's Catholic and I'm Catholic. And by that time, I was 30 years old, and I had come up with a list of 10 things that I needed in a man. And one of them included, he must like only me, because I
That's a
had
good one.
chosen I had chosen poorly a few times leading up to that, um, on people thinking that they could date more than one person at a time and not be truthful about that.
Mhm.
Anyway, he checked like 8 or 9 of the 10 boxes. And anyway, the summer before I started law school, we ended up dating the whole time I was in law school in Miami. He lived here. I now live in Houston, Texas. You can tell who won that. He did. Actually, he won because he got me. But
That's right.
fast forward, we got married a couple years, 2.5. We were dated long distance 2.5, got married a couple years later. We have 3 wonderful kids. So it's wonderful. Um, but going into law school, no, I didn't know what to do. And I thought, I'll figure it out. And then I moved to Texas after I graduated law school, and I got a job in civil litigation. I knew for sure that I could never do criminal defense. People used to say that all the time, like, "Oh, did you ever think about doing criminal defense?" No, not for a single
Right.
millisecond of life, because I believe strongly in putting them in jail, and I don't want to help break apart the case to get them out of jail. And so
Right.
I certainly don't want to do anything to make cops look stupid. I think they do that on their own well enough. Um, so went into litigation, and also, as mad as I was leaving the sheriff's office and how hurt I was, and didn't talk to any of those guys for about 12 or 13 years. And
Wow.
I will talk about that being part of, I want to come back to that, but because that it didn't have to be that way.
Right.
Um, that I knew somehow I wanted to help cops again somehow. I just didn't know what that would be.
Mhm.
And fast forward to about, well, summer of 2020. is when, oh no, the fall of 2019 and early 2020, right before the COVID crap happened. I hated law firm life, just hated it. I don't like the egos that come with trial lawyers. I worked with a lot of really successful trial attorneys. They cannot, I don't know how they can handle patting themselves on the back as much as they do. Um, and I just hated the litigation world, hated working for, I don't, and the people I worked with. And so I decided I would start working myself out of it. And then COVID happened. And then all of a sudden I had 3 kids at home every day. So that worked out. And the summer of 2020, when George Floyd thing happened, I spent 2 weeks being mad at the world at how they blamed all cops as, like, all of a sudden all cops were murderers, which we
Yeah.
all know is not true.
Right.
And I mean, I'd be on social media and I'd just be getting mad. My husband would say, "Stop looking." And I'm like, "I can't." And it makes me so mad. And then,
Yep.
but I'm a firm, but like I said at the beginning of this, I choose positive Polly, not Debbie Downer. I choose to find ways to be positive Polly as often as I can. It's why I have a tattoo of a sunrise on my wrist, because I believe every day is a new day and it brings with it opportunity and possibility, no matter how crappy you feel at the end of the day. So I thought in the summer of 2020, I was like, okay, this is bad. And I do not think all cops are bad. In fact, I think 98 to 99% of all cops are good people
Mhm.
and make the right decisions. But, or, and what could we do better? What could we learn? Where could we look at and say, but well, how could I do better? And then how can I help with that? I've been in the job. I know what it's like. I know what it's how it takes things from you, even when you're not dealing with crap within your department. The job is going to change who you are. You are not the same person coming out of the job as you go into it. You see too much death, violence, anger, mayhem, all those things. And then realizing that the way that I can help with that is when you are facing a problem inside your department, I know from experience how consuming it is. I know that you already need to have a very proactive wellness routine to be a happy and healthy person. And most people don't do all that. And on top, if you add on top of that problems within your department, you can very quickly go down a steep, unhealthy, dangerous, depressive mental slope, like that mental health, that slippery slope downward. And so what I know is that I know what it's like. I've been there, and now I'm an attorney and I can help you figure out what to do. I can help you figure out what to say. I can support you while you are going through that and say, no, no, nope, they can't tell you this. And here's why. Here's what you need to say back to that. I can do it for you. So that's how I crafted it, starting about 4 years ago, crafted my firm. And it really started with, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine from my yoga studio. And he's like, well, and then I can't remember the question he asked me exactly, but the answer was, I want to be able to help the person that I was then. I want to be able to help me when I was like so sad and didn't know what to do and didn't know who to turn to and didn't know what to say, didn't trust my union, didn't trust my union rep, didn't know, nobody around me was saying and standing up for me. And I just kept thinking, and I tell people this all the time. I kept thinking, but surely people see this. Like when the teammate came up to me and said, "I'm sorry, you got a raw deal." Like, okay, so you saw this the whole time and you didn't say anything? And that's crushing. And I tell people all the time, nobody's going to do it for you, but I want to help you know how to do it for yourself. So that's how
Yes.
it took. I finished law school in December of 2007. And it only took until 2000 for me to figure out how I can really help. But that's the journey I had to go through and be on. And now I know, and and get the experience that I got through being in civil litigation. I know the process
Right.
and help you figure out what you can do and when you should react and how to say that. So that's a very long way of saying, did I know what I wanted to do when I went to law school? The short answer is hell no, I didn't know. But
Right.
but thank goodness I did all that. And thank goodness that happened to me at the sheriff's office, because I can help so many people across the country and do, thankfully, or not thankfully, because I'm sorry they're going through it, but it happens. And you
Mhm.
want somebody who understands and can help you know what to say.
100%. I think most, if not all people who are going to be listening to this, who are a first responder, will be able to relate to somehow, some way, feeling at some point that there was something to report or something to say that they felt like they couldn't. Or maybe
Yeah.
they felt like they didn't have someone they could at least ask, like you said, "Hey, am I over exaggerating or is this
Hmm.
something?" You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And me personally, I've been there, unfortunately, too many times. Um,
Hmm.
but um, I know you help officers with retaliation, discrimination. What's an example of someone that might have a case for themselves? Is that too broad of a question?
No, there's and I can give you specifics. So there's explicit things that happen, and then
Okay.
there's the circumstantial things that happen, and those are obviously two terms of legal terms of art. But explicit, here's an example. I have a client who her chief was similar to me or like you,
Mhm.
and I want to go back to two things that you just said before I could move on. One is, sadly, it's not, especially for females. And it's just it's a fact of life. I'm looking at the sky, it's blue. You can't be mad about the sky being blue, it just is.
Right,
Women and men, apples and oranges, Mars, Venus, we're just different. So
right,
as long as you are in this profession, you are going to be different. That doesn't necessarily mean bad, and some people don't know how to handle or deal with different. But what I'll say is, it's not a matter of if it's going to happen to you if you're a female in law enforcement. It's a matter of when. And that could be through, the promotional process happens and people change, you change departments, your chief changes, the new sheriff's elected. It can change drastically from sheriff to sheriff, chief to chief, sergeant to sergeant. And so, sadly, as a female in law enforcement, it's a matter of when. And then also, just to go back, and I just want to shout out to what you do, it's just that you have this community to support women. And can we just find a way to scream it from the rafters to know, like, you might not have it in your own department, but the community is out there. And it literally,
right,
as cheesy it is, it gives me chills. I didn't have it. There were women at the sheriff's office that I would have given anything for them to come to me and pull me aside and say, Bridget, I see what's happening. Here's what you need to do.
right.
Nothing, that did not happen. Partly because some of them were coming after me, which also
Which also
infuriated me.
happens. Mhm.
Happens a
Yeah.
lot. Um, a female dispatcher came out, like, totally came after me, like, just spreading rumors about me. Like, one of the guys on SWAT, his wife, I can't remember if she was a deputy or dispatcher at the time, but we were out doing some driving training one day, or maybe we were assisting with driving training. I don't remember what it was, but I won't say his first name, something Long, which is appropriate because he was really skinny and tall, so he was a very long person. His wife was always very nice to me, but then and he was nice to me. He was one of the few where I felt like, okay, if you're being nice to me, I don't feel like you're flirting with me. I just feel like we're generally having just a nice human conversation.
Right.
She found out about it and found out that we were smiling while we were talking to each other. And so figured we were flirting. And then sometime later, he's like, sorry, I can't really talk to you anymore. My wife got mad 'cause she found out we were talking at training. Like, we're on SWAT together. Like, we had already competed on SWAT roundup together. I mean, we had done all, like, are you kidding me? I was so upset by that, hurt me too, really bad about her. Like, I'm not
Yeah.
trying to steal your husband, lady.
Right,
Why
right.
would I want to date a cop anyway? Because I'll also say that might not go well. We had a secretary in our narcotics unit that said to me one time, Bridget, don't get your honey where you get your money. And she was right. Um, so examples, let me go back to that because I do think that's very important for people to hear. One, here's a specific
Right,
example. She was being targeted by her chief, just all of a sudden getting in trouble for too many things. He transferred her from day shift to night shift, and on night shift, she couldn't be the mental health person that she was getting the extra stipend for, so she lost some money from it and all these things. So, and then, and that kind of stuff, as you know, starts to be distracting. It starts to distract you from being able to doing your job as well as you can because you're just always so worried about getting in trouble that you
right,
can't perform fully. So she made a mistake. So she went to him one day that she asked for the meeting and just said, "Hey, I just want you to know, like, I want you to know this is important to me. I want you to know I'm going to do better. Yes, I made a mistake." And she, like, handled a gun without gloves, so potentially got her fingerprints on it. But it's not like she poured bleach on it. I mean,
right,
way overreacted. Well, that could have been a weapon from a crime, and you tainted the chain of evidence. And now if it is a weapon used in a crime, now we can't use it. I'm like, okay, that's not true at all. You can just
right.
eliminate her fingerprints. And so she's going to him, was like, look, I made a mistake. You're right, but I'm definitely, it's important to me. You know, what can I do to show you that I'll do better? And he said, well, you know, we walked past you in the hall the other day and you didn't say hi. And she's like, what? And he's like, yeah, you know, I've talked with everybody. Like, it's important to me that everyone's nice in the department. And she's like, okay, well, you know, I've just been a little distracted. There's things going on at home. And he said, oh, are you okay? Are you safe? And she's like, oh yeah, yeah, I'm safe. He's like, he's not hurting you, right? He's like, no, 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 that's not it. She's like, just, you know, we're going.
Right.
He said, well, are you still intimate with your husband? And she
What?
says, yeah. She changes the subject and he comes back and he says, well, but are you still intimate with your husband? And she's like, well, no, and my husband, you know, and then my son, she gives another answer and moves on. Which of
Right.
course she walks out of there freaking out because it's the most uncomfortable. There was another lieutenant in the room. So now these two guys who so far outrank her, she feels like she
Right.
needs, it's like all the ways you know that's wrong. So fast forward a couple weeks, she asked her sergeant, I don't know what to do about this. He's like, well, do you want me to report it? Eventually he reports it because that's what the policy says. He has to report it.
Correct. Yes.
As he's walking out of HR reporting it, the chief bumps into him. Oh, what happened? Well, he tells the chief. The chief goes to IA and says, I want you to investigate her for gossiping.
Oh.
So he instructs the IA. They investigate her over a week later, they fire her for basically
How
gossiping. Yeah.
can you get
And
fired for that at a police department when everyone gossips?
yeah,
Like the
but
most
specifically
gossipy
because
place in the world.
the gossiping was her talking to her sergeant, and she was freaking
Right.
out. She
In a
texted a couple
professional
other people.
meeting.
They would say, "Do you want to report it?" And she literally said to them, and they all said this, "I'm afraid if I report it, he'll retaliate against me and I'll get fired." So she got fired. Sadly, the HR department, who we also put in the lawsuit, um, he did the exact same thing 1 year prior to somebody in the city, and they didn't do anything about it. And so literally another his explanation was, well, that's a standard question I ask in all domestic violence investigations. And
Oh my
I
God, please.
like said no good cop ever. Like you don't ask a woman that was raped if her skirt was too short. Are you
Oh
kidding
my
me?
God.
Of all the domestic violence scenes that you've been on, did you ever once ask the victim, the woman, if she got beat up because she wasn't having enough sex with her husband?
Oh my God.
I mean, is so okay, that is an extreme example. That's an explicit example.
To
The
be
circum
honest, it's like sad, but like to me, it's not that extreme. Like I've been in situations probably like where I've been asked worse questions by supervisors. So
well,
yeah.
that's not legal. Yeah, and
Yeah.
you could report it.
Yeah.
The subtle ones are like a lot of my own examples where like you like raise your hand. I do this when I go to speak at conferences about this because my goal is for you to know that like you know how you do firearm training and you do over and over and over and over
Mhm.
again. And the reason we all know the reason why you train over and over and over again about the same thing is so that your body will react immediately to do what you need to do without thinking about it. Because when the proverbial poop hits the fan, you don't have time to think. You just have to do. Like if your
Mhm.
gun jams, you need to be able to clear that really quickly, you know, without thinking about it so that you don't die. Well, my goal is that I can educate you on all these things and sign up for my newsletter so that you can just get little tidbits all the time so that when it happens to you, you automatically know it's wrong. You automatically know what you should do and then do something about it. And I'm not saying burn the building down or go file a lawsuit. I'm going to make you know like what is right and what is wrong, what can you and what can you not do something about, and then where should you start to report it? That's what I want you to do. So mine was, and the other thing I'll do when I speak at conferences is I'll be like, raise your hand if you've never made a mistake on the job. Nobody keeps their
Right.
hand, like, you know, there's nobody. So you can make mistakes. You can mishandle evidence. And yet the way that they come after you for it can still be wrong. And so if you're like, if I got written up for leaving my car door open and my sergeant, nobody said a single thing to him, is that one instance harassment, discrimination? Probably not. But you can put together a string of those things, I'm sure you can, that show, well, I got in trouble for this time and nobody else did. I got in trouble for this time and nobody else did. I got in trouble for this time. And I mean, I could give you 6 examples of, for me, my own story within less than a year of it. When you put that all together, that's hostile work environment, that's harassment, it's discrimination. If you report it and those things starts happening, then you have retaliation.
Mm.
Um, or it can come in a lot of different forms. And so it's when you look at it, and like I literally called, I have some clients I'm helping out of Illinois, and I can help people nationwide because it's based on federal law. And as long as you're licensed in any state in the US, you can work on federal issues. And so of these clients in Illinois, I ended up getting in touch with their attorney for the police department. And I'm talking to him about it. And I was like, look, I just want to see if we could engage in a conversation. Cause really what they want is they have this like pre-SWAT team that they were on, and they only 2 women, and only the women got kicked off for things that guys did too, but they didn't even get written up for it.
Right.
I said, all they want is to be back on the team. And he's like, well, but I looked into this before your call and she made a mistake. And I was like, okay. But what I would ask for you to do is, how about you pull out her whole file and start looking at it from a 50,000-foot view and see how many times has this one person gotten in trouble in the last 12 months versus, and look at what it's for. Because I guarantee you, if you say, well, it's for this, I'll be able to say, yeah, but that happened 3 times last month, the guys, and they didn't get in trouble. Well, what about
Mhm.
this? That happened 2 times last month and the guys didn't get in trouble for it. And that's a term of art. It's called disparate treatment. So those are things where you have to put it together circumstantially. And I bet that anybody listening, again, if you've been in the job long enough, I bet something rang a bell with you,
Yeah.
that it's happened to you and you either blew it off or you didn't want to be that girl. I didn't either.
Mhm.
I didn't want to be quote unquote that, the air quotes, that girl, because I wanted to be respected as an investigator, as an operator. And I didn't want to report it because then I would be that person. But at the end of the day, what I learned was it didn't matter. I left the sheriff's office, um, or I left SWAT team in, let's say, August, September. Well, SWAT Roundup is still the first week of November, first or second week of November in Orlando every year. And I went to SWAT Roundup for a day. Just so happened to be in the area. I went for a day. I had competed the 2 years before, so I saw some people I knew. I voluntarily left the narcotics unit and SWAT team. And one of the first things one of the guys said to me, he goes, "Oh, hey, I heard you got kicked off from the narcotics unit
Of
because
course.
you lied, because they caught you lying for a snitch." Like, okay. And that's also when it hit me. Like, nothing I did mattered to them.
Right.
And also, that's the slippery slope, because you're gonna start to think nothing I do matters. Um, I tell this story a lot. Lauren Houston, you can find her on TikTok. I don't know other social media, but I know she's on TikTok and she's shared her story. She faced horrific discrimination um, at a smallish department. I don't know. It's actually not that small in Missouri, and sued her department. And over the 2-year process of reporting it and fighting it, she ended up settling with them. She attempted suicide 4 times
Oh my
because
God.
she convinced herself she was the problem, and if she could remove herself, the problem would go away. Thankfully, she's happy and healthy, probably not going back into law enforcement. I try to encourage her into sharing her story and
Mhm.
making sure her voice is heard, because the worst thing that could possibly happen is for you to think that you're alone and that nobody cares and that nothing you do matters. And it's can't be further from the truth. And the way that I can help with that is to help you solve if the legal problem is what you feel like is pushing you underwater. Um, you help with that because of the community that you have and sharing these stories and getting these stories out there, because it makes such a big difference. You're never, ever, I just commented on somebody's post on social media the other day. You are never alone, ever,
Right. Right.
ever. Sometimes you need to have the courage to say it out loud to somebody, and you will
Right.
realize how many people want to help.
Right. No, absolutely. And you mentioned wrongful termination. And I think that's something I want to touch on really quick
Yep.
as well.
Yep.
Um, so if someone's feels that they were wrongfully terminated, what is like the 3 things that or like what should they do immediately? Should they lawyer up immediately?
Well, of course, my advice is yes, lawyer up, because, and not because, yes, that's what I do, and yes, I get paid to do it, but because they're not going to listen to you. Um, they're going to ignore you because they can. I say all
Mm,
the time, it's easy to ignore a private problem. It is not easy to ignore a public problem. And when you start
yes.
putting lawyers' eyes on it, when you start getting a lawyer making a phone call, when you start getting the lawyer sending the email like I do, making a public records request where I want to get your
Mhm.
entire employee file so I can see what they're putting in it. When I start putting like, hey, oh, I sent an email and I didn't put the specifics. I said, hey, I'd like to have a conversation either with whoever is in charge of handling wrongful termination claims from my clients, so and so and so and so, that starts to really change how they look at things. And so, yes, you should lawyer up, number one. Number two, the reason why you should do that, and yes, you should do it right away. The reason why, um, let's say you do want to file a lawsuit. You can't do that unless you file an administrative claim first, and that is either with the EEOC at the federal level, or there's often a state equivalent for it. Like in Texas, it's the Texas Workforce Commission. I have clients in Minnesota. I think it's called the Minnesotan Division of Human Rights or something like that. Either way, you got to do it quickly. Sometimes it's 180 days. Sometimes it's with the EEOC, it's 300 days. So that means from the date you got fired,
Mhm.
you have 300 days to file that claim. But the reason why you also
Mm.
want to do it right away and not wait 300 days is because it's everything that happened 300 days from when you filed it. So if you wait 300 days to file your wrongful termination claim, the only thing you can claim is that you got fired. You can't talk about everything that happened before that because it's
Okay.
beyond the 300 days, if that makes
Mhm.
sense.
Yep.
So you want to do it right away. And you also have to go through that EEOC process. If the EEOC does not choose to file a lawsuit for you, which they almost never do, they will end up giving you something called a right to sue letter. That's if you don't mediate, but you file your EEOC claim, you should they'll ask you if you want to mediate. I always say yes. It's up to you. You have to do that with them. Like my advice is agree to mediate, but both sides have to agree to mediate. If your agency doesn't agree, you won't mediate.
Right.
Then they'll eventually give you a right to sue letter. Once you get the right to sue letter, you have 90 days to file your lawsuit or forever give up that claim. Oh, there's a lot that happens in there that it's very important to have an attorney because I know the litigation process. I know what you need to say and not say. Almost
Right.
every single time I've had a client come to me who already filed an EEOC claim, it is missing 98% of what it should say in the claim, and I have to amend it and go add to it.
Got
And
it.
it also makes the agency who gets a copy of what you file, they get a copy of everything you write, all the details. It's so much more helpful to put all the specifics in up front of how they violated the law.
Mm.
Um, so one, you should hire an attorney. Two, you should do it right away. But the third thing is, which comes way before that. The first thing that you ever do is start writing your story down.
I was just gonna say document, document,
You
document.
must
Yep.
100% document. Lauren
Yeah.
Houston had volumes of things that she had documented. Every time she'd ask to go to a training and they would say no, she would ask why. I always tell people, I always say this, what's the worst thing that you can do if you ask, like, if you ask for something, what's the worst thing that they can do? They'll say no.
Mhm.
Well, if they say no, great. Ask why. But
Mm.
get it in writing because they would say, well, we can't send you because of this. Well, they can't say, well, no, you got to go ask this person. She should go ask this person. And then they were
Yeah,
always
it's always the
doing
runaround.
this.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
she was able to show that there's no valid reason for them to say what they were saying to her. And it's because of that amazing documentation she had. And I don't know how much she settled for, and she's not allowed to tell anybody. She had a non-disclosure agreement. But I think that's why she was able to settle. Now, that being said, I recently settled for a client. We filed her EEOC claim in January, February. If you both agreed to mediate, it generally takes about 6 months for them to schedule that. We mediated in August, and they offered a number that was higher than I thought they would ever get to, and she accepted, and now we're done. So she got a
Yeah.
financial settlement for wrongful termination based
Good.
off of harassment and discrimination.
Yeah.
She also, unfortunately, attempted suicide before she hired me.
Mm.
Um, Thankfully, she didn't succeed because she has children. I mean, not that
Yeah.
it's sad no matter what, but also so glad for her kids. Um, so write it down, and write it down. Because
Yeah.
if you hire me, the first thing I'm going to say is, okay, send me your written timeline of events. I need to know all the times they said no to you, or something that happened to you, or like in my scenario, like, well, I got in trouble for leaving my car door open, but he did it. And like, I need to know who and dates. And you might feel like you're tattletaling, but I need you to tattletale to me because I
Mm.
need to know that because the EEOC is going to ask us that, and I need to be able to provide those details. You
Mhm.
can't just say, "Well, I wasn't treated fairly," and then the EEOC is going to say, "Well, I need examples," and then you'll say, "Well, I don't want to tell on people," and the EEOC will say, "Okay, well, your case is closed." Like, they
Right,
need to know,
100%,
like,
yeah.
how they're treating others if they're not treating you like, "I'm not being
Right,
treated fairly." Okay, well, then tell us how you're not being treated fairly.
right.
And wrongful termination, just to say, I mean, you can always ask to be reinstated. You can ask to be reinstated so that you can resign instead.
Okay.
I do that a lot. I have a lot of couple, I think, 2 clients where she doesn't wanna go back. 2, they're females. But I also have plenty of male clients too, just because women still on average only represent about 13% of law enforcement. So I have a lot of male clients, but definitely these 2 female examples where they were terminated. And part of what I'm asking for is reinstatement and resignation, like reinstate them just so that they can resign. Because it obviously, if you want
Right.
to stay in the field, it looks a lot better if you resign instead of get terminated. Um, Unfortunately, you can't do a lot to change records in your file because there's obviously we don't want dirty cops to be able to cover up being dirty, and so it's really hard to change something once it gets into your file. But we can still ask for things like an amendment or an addendum to reports to say like, oh, well, this has changed. And I'm in the process of that where I can't have something taken out of a police file, but I'm asking them to file an addendum to say, oh, well, upon further consideration of additional information, we have cleared this deputy of that claim unfounded, something like
Yeah.
that. So,
So, okay. So typically we have like you obviously know, but we have like a union rep or an FOP or
yep,
whatever. What would be the reason we would want an outside attorney?
that's a great question because unions typically don't do what I do. Um, if your harassment or discrimination, hostile work environment has resulted in you being disciplined, days off, a very good example is a client of mine also out of the same Illinois police department. I actually have 3 clients from the same police department coming from a female chief, which really chaps my hide when it's a female
Mm,
chief doing this stuff.
mhm.
But um, he has been suspended with pay since April. So he's getting paid, but he's not working. And
Mhm.
he's working, his union lawyer is helping on the investigation. And at some point, they're going to have to finish off the investigation and tell him, like, here's a slap on the hand, where here's your discipline, you're terminated or whatever.
Yeah.
Right now, in a holding pattern, because there's nothing I can do for him. I mean, because no judge is going to say there's like, you're getting paid to do nothing. Like, just sit there and wait. Not that that's right or fair that you like it, but I mean, they don't consider that true harm in the eyes of the court. But
Right.
in so I work with the union lawyer because he's working at it from the standpoint of if they're disciplining him, then he's involved in maybe like trying to not, no discipline or lessen the discipline. And then once that gets finalized, I do believe it's his specific case. I think it's retaliation for his union organizing events because it's a northern state where they have more union power than they do where I live. But either way, that's illegal. And so if that happens, and if they do penalize them in some way, then I step in to handle those claims, whether it's if it's an EEOC claim or an NLRB claim, whatever. Unions don't usually do that type of work. And I work with the union lawyer while it's going on. So one of my female clients here who was fired from a department, her union lawyer is still helping her because it was action, even though she was fired from there, she still can get, because it happened while she was a union member at the time. He's trying to help negotiate settling. And if it doesn't work, then she'll come to me because he won't file an EEOC claim. They don't file EEOC claims. They don't file, like, let's say you're being retaliated against for filing a workers' comp claim. That's generally a state claim. That's not EEOC. But also, your union won't handle that. They won't handle filing or putting people on notice of retaliation, discrimination, hostile work environment. They don't do any of that. Um, Sometimes they'll advise you on it. Um,
Yeah.
a lot of times, what I hear them saying is the union lawyer will say, "No, I don't think you can do anything about that." And while I appreciate that's what they say, it's also not the field that they practice in. And so, a lot of times, people will call me and I'll say, "Well, that's not exactly true." And also, no harm, no foul in drafting a demand letter to send to a department to ask to get things fixed. And when I say a
Right.
demand letter, it's that I'm not necessarily saying give me $1 million. Also, that's almost impossible to get from the government. Um, Not impossible though. Um, just tough to get. But so there's a lot of things you can ask for, a lot of things that come way before ever even filing a lawsuit, even can come before filing an EEOC claim. Um, you can ask for what you want before you ever file it. You can put them on notice of what they've done wrong and how you want them to rectify it. Um, and sometimes that, I mean, it does work without having to go through even a lawsuit. I mean, it doesn't always work. It depends very specifically on your department and your administration and the city or county you work for.
Yeah.
But um, but yes, uh, you need to just get help. And that's one of the reasons why I offer what I call a consultation, because I think a lot of times, because having been in it, you want somebody who can really look at the whole story, assess everything, and then tell you what your options are. And
Correct.
then
Yeah.
maybe nothing else. Like I had somebody
Right.
hire me the other day, heard me speak at a conference 2 years ago, and now he's having a problem at work. He hired me. I gave him my assessment of what I thought was going on. And right away, they wanted him to answer some questions they put in writing. So he was able to send me the questions. I read through them and I was like, okay, here's your answer to every one of those questions. No. And don't
Right.
say anything other than no. Like whether I coach
Wow.
you through an interview, just like I would coach somebody through a deposition, like do not offer unnecessary information. That's what I told him. And honestly, I'm not even through with the services that comes with the consultation, but he's like, yeah, thank you so much. That's all I need. Uh, Peace out. Cause I helped him through that process and I haven't heard from him
Right.
since. I keep emailing him saying, hey, I can still help you a little bit more. And he's like, I'm good. Um, but he literally was in tears with me on the phone and said, oh my gosh, thank you so much. He said, I've been going through this since April. I've been losing my mind and and my anxiety's been through the roof. And he's like, and now finally I feel better. And that's why I offer that just intro consultation. And then of course I can help people do it beyond that. I can write your EEOC claim. I can write demand letters. I can call the department, all that, but I don't think that's always necessary. And that's also why I don't think I'm your normal lawyer. Um, because I very specifically want to help eliminate this problem or give you answers so that you feel like you have more control over it.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. And like what you're saying, it's like I wish I had this 2 years ago.
I know. I
But
know.
this is going to be so helpful. And I also want to reiterate what you touched on earlier, that anyone in any state, correct, can
Yep.
contact you.
Mhm.
Okay. So
I just got a client
um,
from Alaska like a month ago. I got
that's
my
good
first
to know though,
Alaska
because I
client.
think a lot of us don't know, like, you know, can we go outside of our union rep, and can we have a legal representation in another state because we work for the state or we work for the city, and it's just we just I guess we just don't really understand.
And I tell people all
We're
the
not
time,
informed.
I was in a union too, and I am definitely pro union. If for no
Yeah,
other
yeah, no,
reason,
for sure.
it gives you legal it gives you an attorney in if you get like sued or use of force or heaven forbid, hopefully not indicted.
Right.
Um that you're $25 a month or whatever you pay for your union, you're paying for the attorney that will represent you in that. So please do that because you cannot afford, I promise you, you cannot afford a criminal defense lawyer on your own. Um, but here's
Yeah.
what I would tell you, everybody. Number one is if you have a union, ask them if they can help you with these types of problems: harassment, discrimination, retaliation, hostile work environment. Say, I think this is a discrimination issue. Can you help me with that? Sometimes let's say no, no, that's not what I do. Sometimes they'll say, well, we might be able to. Sometimes you can still hire me and the union will then reimburse you for some or all of that cost. Even the
Okay.
one
Good
out
to know.
of Illinois, as I've talked with the first two officers and now this third, I've talked with the same union attorney now twice. And I was telling him like what I think will come next. And like I feel bad for them because I don't want to do it yet because I don't want them to have to spend the money. And then he said, well, let me have them get with me on that because if they have to pay you to help with that, the union might be able to reimburse some of that cost. So while they don't do it directly, sometimes they do have a fund to help cover legal fees if it's outside of what the union, not all unions, and union to union, it's very different. And that's not FOP. I can tell you they don't do that. But ask anyway. Like I say, what's the worst thing that can happen if you ask for something is they'll say no. So definitely start with your union because if you don't need to pay me, great. Don't pay me, but get an attorney
Yeah.
because they're going to be able to help you in a way that you can't help yourself.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think this is going to be really, really helpful. And unfortunately, in today's age with social media, the gossiping is
Yeah.
even worse, and the group chats, and it's
Hmm.
gets to be pretty horrific. And I know firsthand, and I know people that go through it. And some people, like you said, it really affects their mental health. And if you're listening, don't let it get to that point. Like
Mm-mm.
contact your union rep, contact Bridget. Like you said, message you and do a consultation and
Mhm,
just talk about it. Like
mhm,
that right there might help you clear up a lot of things.
mhm.
Is there any final takeaways you can leave our listeners with who are listening and who might be going through any of these things, or maybe something completely different that they might need legal representation for? And then where could we find you online, and maybe how can someone get a consultation? Best way for them to get a consultation with you.
Yeah. Um, the takeaway, when I give presentations, I always finish with, I don't do workers' comp. There are attorneys who specialize in workers' comp. But just like in an EEOC claim, you can file that on your own. I do not recommend you ever do that because every state, that's a state issue. So I don't do workers' comp in Texas where I live. I certainly don't do it outside of my state, but it's very complicated. Um, and it's not user friendly. So when I always, at the end of my presentations, I always say, look, I don't do workers' comp, but I want to say, if you ever get hurt on the job, there's a couple of things I want you to know. One is that workers' comp coverage is more broad for first responders than it is for civilians. And I'll give you two examples. One is PTSD is covered. It's considered an on-the-job injury, which means that you get coverage for it for the expenses associated with that as a first responder, but it's not for civilians. Another one is something like hypertension. I'm not a doctor, so I'm not going to explain it to you, but look it up. You can get hypertension if you live in a job that has high levels of stress over long periods of time, which is what we know law enforcement is. Um, Look up that. I mean, hopefully nobody, but if you have something like hypertension, that is considered an on-the-job injury for a first responder. It's not for civilians. So number one is it's more broad for you. And then number two is make the claim. If you are not healthy in any kind of way, make the claim for workers' comp because you will not be in this job forever. And the other one I'll say, raise your hand if, and I give this talk is if you've ever known anybody or heard of somebody who dropped dead 1 month to 1 year after they retire. Everybody
I'm
knows
raising my
somebody.
hand.
Right. I'm raising my hand. And
And
it's
it's not
so
funny.
sad.
It's just
It's
I
not.
shouldn't laugh, but it's just so wild that you can
It
make it all
is.
the way through retirement and
Right.
then right after,
You
you
can
know.
get a therapist. You can have something, if you think you have PTSD, you can go get therapy, and that's all confidential. Your department doesn't have to know you're doing that. Now, if you do have legit PTSD and it's starting to interfere with how you do your job, then 100% you need to tell somebody, not just because you might put your own life in danger, but you're putting the community, your coworkers in danger. Um, but what I say to that is, please make a claim. If I had made a claim when I was on SWAT, oh, I don't want to make the claim because then I'll be injured and then they'll take me off SWAT. And what if they don't put me back? Well, what if I die? And then I won't be on SWAT anyway. And I know that sounds extreme, but I'm not on SWAT now. And it could stop, your job can stop tomorrow, but you want to be
Right.
able, you're going to live a long time. Make that be a healthy, long life. And the
Yes.
reason why I use that, the takeaway is do the same for yourself if you're dealing with a problem at work. I thought leaving the sheriff's office in the way that I did was the worst thing that ever happened to me. And what I know is I got past it. I'm stronger now because of it. I can help in the way that I can help now. But my biggest regret is in two ways for not reporting my issue. One is because that makes them, then they think that everything they're doing was okay, and then they were going to do it to the person behind me, and I'm ashamed of that. I'm ashamed that somebody could come behind me and be treated that way when I could have stopped it and I didn't. But number two is because it significantly impacted me and my mental health, my outlook. It took me 12 to 13 years to realize that I was holding on to that story so tightly in my mind and inside of me that I couldn't let it go. It took me, I'm like literally, I think it was around year 13. I thought, wow, I'm the only one holding on to this, not anybody else. Everybody
Mm.
else moves on. Only me. I've got to let this go. And that's not easy to do, but it is easier to do if you stand up for yourself on your own 2 feet. And am I saying that's going to be easy? No, I am not saying that. But what I counter to that is you don't choose easy. You chose law enforcement. That's not easy. So Live your life the best way that you know you need to live it for you, not for anybody else and not according to anybody else's opinions. Because in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, you're going to be doing something else. And you want to be able to look back and know I did the right thing. So that's what I take. Now, where can you find me? LadyLawShield.com. That's how you can book a call with me. I really encourage you to sign up for my newsletter because, like I said, maybe you'll never need me. But in the meantime, train yourself to know when to respond and why you should respond and what to do when you respond. And so it's your tactical employment law training through the newsletter, or you can follow me through social media and the links are on the website. So LadyLawShield.com is where you go.
Thank you so much for your time, Bridget. Like, seriously, I think this is going to be really beneficial. And like you said, I wish I had done more when I was experiencing it to help
Mm-hmm.
the girl after me.
Mm-hmm.
And now that I found more of a voice in myself,
Mm-hmm.
and now that I'm not afraid that if I do say something, if like you, like if people call me a snitch, so what? I don't
Mm-hmm.
care.
Yeah.
So, but before I did, I cared
Yeah.
too much of what
Mm-hmm.
would be the retaliation
Yeah.
against me if I spoke up.
Mm-hmm.
And in turn, I suffered in silence, and that's
Mm-hmm.
just not okay. So
No.
I'm really glad that I'm beyond that point, but I do feel, like you said, a responsibility now, like you, to speak up. And yeah, I think that if you're listening and you feel any sort of unsureness or whatever, contact Bridget because clarity is something like you can't put a price tag on for
Oh,
real.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and that's your mental health. You cannot put a
Mental
price
health,
on
you
that.
can't put a price
Yeah.
tag on it. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for being
You're
here.
welcome
I
so much.
appreciate all you do for us. Beyond you probably don't get thanked enough, just like how we don't. And you really, really deserve a thank you. So I
Well,
really,
thank you
really
very much. Yeah, I appreciate that. And regardless of whether you reported at the time, you're certainly making a difference in the voice and the way that you're using it now. So you definitely are making up for putting
I
people
hope
on
so.
notice of doing wrong things. We don't we can't change how they might hear it or what they do after, but we can certainly put it out there and help the people we can help. So thanks to
Absolutely.
you as well.
Thank you.
You're
Well, take
welcome.
care.
Thank you.